Okay, so I've talked a lot recently about the PS2 Era of Tekken. As much as I love both Tekken 4 and Tekken 5, Tekken Tag Tournament is probably my favorite Tekken game of all time, and a bridge between two different periods of the series. The arcade version of Tekken Tag Tournament dropped in 1999. Man, I can still remember the feeling when I stepped into an arcade expecting to see dueling Tekken 3 arcade machines and instead seeing a Tekken Tag one placed in the center between them. A method my local arcade used 2 years earlier with Tekken 2 and Tekken 3, by the way. Tekken Tag felt like an all-star game. That roster had every single character in the series minus Gon at the time in the franchise, and it was insane. Some of the missing Tekken 2 characters were my main only complaint with Tekken 3 at the time. Tag 1 was basically Tekken 3 with Tekken 2's roster added in a nutshell. Baek, Jun, Armor King, Bruce, Michelle, Kazuya, they're all back, and they fit like a glove with Tekken 3's roster. Honestly, I love Tekken 2, but boy did that gameplay not age well over time. Tekken 3's gameplay was far superior to Tekken 2's, and it didn't have that floaty, muddy nature that Tekken 2 had. In hindsight, of course. It was okay for its time, but by 1999, even Tekken 2 started to feel like it was dated already. But Tekken Tag 1 felt so crisp, and it's kinda hard for me to explain why. Tekken Tag 1 and Tekken 3 both felt the same, but just slightly different. Tekken Tag 1, for whatever reason, just felt a little smoother and a little faster. The juggling is still there, but it doesn't feel as floaty and ridiculous as Tekken 1 and 2, but it just felt slightly more snappier than Tekken 3, at least in my opinion. There could actually be no difference between how Tekken 3 and Tekken Tag Tournament 1 played, but I don't know why to me it just felt like it was different. And it may just be because of added tag mechanics and just being able to tag in and out in the middle of juggle combos, or being able to pull together like specific team combinations depending upon what two characters you played with, but I just like how Tekken Tag 1 felt a lot more in comparison to 3. Considering nothing really changed as far as like inputs or anything are concerned. Like it just felt really nice to have Tekken 2 characters with much better gameplay. My literal only complaint with Tekken Tag Tournament 1 in terms of actually playing the game that I have personally is that the game was one and done. After you beat one member of the other team, the round was over. Selfishly on my part, I never liked this because I wanted the games and fights to last as long as humanly possible, so eliminating both people would have been fine for me. Yes, it was that fun to where you wanted the rounds to last longer. Then there was the look of the game. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the game looks pretty damn similar to Tekken 3. Even the main menus and the energy bars, etc., it looks pretty close to the PS1 game. So much so that I actually told myself for years that Tekken 3's graphics kinda hold up to this day. I was actually very mistaken. While Tekken 3 doesn't necessarily look bad, its graphics don't hold up in 2025. Tekken Tags do, however. It looked so similar to Tekken 3 that I actually confused how the game's graphics looked over time. But Tekken Tag was clearly an improvement over the other one. I don't even know why I mixed the two games, or not mixed their graphical looks at the time, but I accepted that Tekken 3 looked far better than it actually did because I just lumped it in with Tekken Tags. Wild on my part. Now, I am old enough to remember that Tekken Tag's graphics actually got criticized in gaming magazines at the time, and rightfully so. I kinda get it for just being a graphical reskin of Tekken 3. And yes, I don't know if Tekken Tag Tournament's graphics were that groundbreaking in comparison to the likes of like DOA 2 at the time, but it's not like that the game didn't still look amazing. There are games that were released 10 years after Tekken Tag 1 that still don't look as pretty as that game looked. Now, it does have that dizzy world spinning issues from the PS1 games, but it doesn't seem as bad here because they actually model 3D assets in the environments now. And since I touched on that, by the way, I am an artist after all, and these are the things that I focus on when looking at certain video games. An amazing touch of the game is that they didn't leave the environments as is from Tekken 3, and they actually changed aspects of how each stage looked. The dojo in Jin's Tekken 3 stages actually opened up so you can get a feel for the full landscape. Yoshimitsu's forest actually has actual trees in the forest this time, instead of just being a static background, but they had the added difference of it being covered with midday snow. A better example of what I'm talking about, and possibly a stroke of genius, they remembered that Heihachi and Ogre stages in Tekken 3 were connected rooms in the same building essentially. However, they updated Ogre's room to have a bunch of flames and torches hanging on the walls. But for Heihachi's, a portion of his stage was destroyed after the aftermath of Jin's Tekken 3 ending. So in Tekken Tag 1, you're actually fighting in the rubble left behind in the stage below in the environment. There's incredible small details like that I'm sure a lot of people either A, don't care, or B, didn't take notice of. Every stage has been touched up and improved for the better. Speaking of which, the character models of Tekken Tag look outstanding. They cleaned up each Tekken 2 character with both Player 1 and Player 2 attires added to the game. Kazuya specifically looks amazing with the updated graphics, but they also improved the Tekken 3 models as well and added new color palettes to each costume. If you need an example of how much better that the actual character models have improved, look no further than Chaoyu. Each mode that you loved from Tekken's past is here, essentially. This was a staple of most Tekken games in the early years. Time attack, survival. They even had a one-on-one mode if you didn't want to deal with the tag mechanics. As a Mortal Kombat player, I'm sure there are a bunch of MK1 fans that are pointing this out as Exhibit A for a no cameo mode. But I have to bring this up just because it's a part of the game. Tekken Tag added a random mode to replace Tekken Ball and Tekken Force mode. Tekken Bowl, which admittedly is way more fun than it has any right to be. Me and my friends actually wasted more time than I think anybody should be on this mode when I was growing up. Would I have rather had Tekken Force mode? Maybe, but the mode was still a nice little break from the fighting as far as a different option or a better option than Tekken Ball mode was. Which, for the record, I still think is the dumbest thing ever, and I can't believe it's back in Tekken 8. But I also feel like Tekken Bowl, considering that it's a tag mode in Tekken Tag Tournament 1, felt way better in this game than it actually did in Tekken 7, which we were charged for, by the way. This game was amazing. The only real criticisms I have of the game are really nitpicky criticisms that have no bearing on the actual gameplay or the real feel of the game. But I'm gonna throw them out here anyways. The first one is I wish we got longer endings. I'm not even asking for full FMV endings, which I'm not gonna lie, that would have been awesome too. And I get why we got the shorter ones that we got in the game, cause I'm not really sure how much they were able to push the hardware at the time in 1999. But actual roster size shouldn't have been the issue. I would like to let people go back and look at Tekken 5's roster and then go back and look at Tekken Tag 1. It's pretty close, to be quite honest. That being said though, some of the endings are still highly entertaining for the duration that they last, Unknown being the only character in the game to have an actual FMV ending. The other complaint, and this is a ridiculous one and it's just me, is I wish there was a way to get the older soundtracks into the game. The music for Tekken Tag 1 is cool, but even if we would have been able to have Tekken 3's music in the game, it would have been okay. Especially considering that we have all the Tekken 3 stages. But again, I understand why we have an original soundtrack for Tekken Tag 1. The game essentially wouldn't have felt like a new game and it would have just felt like a Tekken 3 reskin more than it already does if you would have just stuck in the same music from the game. That's why in my mind it would have just been nice to be able to listen to it in theater mode or something like that, the same way you could listen to Tekken 2's music in theater mode in Tekken 3 if you had the disc. Again, this is just childish nitpicking. Personally and purely for the nostalgia, Tekken Tag 1 is my favorite Tekken game of all time. Do I think it's the best in the series? Absolutely not. But the game is extremely fun and it's ridiculously playable to this day. I'm actually amazed at how much replay value this game still has in 2025 at this point. I'm also shocked that in today's gaming world of nickel and diamond consumers that Namco has not tried to charge us for a re-release of this game outside of the Tekken Hybrid release on PS3 and Xbox 360. For this to be an introduction of Tekken into a new generation of consoles, the franchise was off to an amazing start here. But These are my thoughts, and admittedly they are very biased. What are your thoughts and memories of Tekken Tag 1? And how do you compare Tekken Tag 1 to Tekken Tag 2, if at all? But in any event, as usual, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and you all have a good one, and I'm out. Alright, Tekken is one of the most prolific fighting game franchises of all time. Tekken's third entry is actually viewed as one of the greatest video games in history, not just fighting games. And although Tekken has had other great entries in the series, one specific game stands out. While it was initially frowned upon on its release, as time progresses, Tekken 4 stands out on its own as one of the most unique games in the entire series. Prior to Tekken 4's release, the Tekken series was an interesting 3D fighter with a diverse roster and a pretty ridiculous story. Up to this point, the trend of the Mishima family throwing each other off of high places was in full effect, as well as a cast of characters that included fighting jaguars, dinosaurs, kangaroos, and robots. Yeah, Tekken's weird. But there was a fun, exciting nature to this series tied to a martial arts tournament. However, by 2002, everything fans had grown accustomed to with the series was about to change. To me, the reason Tekken 4 is one of my favorites and one of the most unique of the franchise's history was because it seemingly took every single thing that it could that we as fans knew about the franchise and changed it up. Some good and some changes were bad. Yes, it was always a game about a martial arts tournament, but that's about where the similarities ended. Just take a look at something as simple as the main menu. Tekken has had a long main menu design for the history of the series up to that point, of the logo with the small scrolling menu underneath, your arcade mode, time attack, survival, options, etc. Tekken 4 said screw that and gave a more interesting background on a modernized full menu layout from the very start. Then, instead of the typical play arcade mode, beat everyone and get a movie ending, Tekken 4 was one of the first in the franchise to actually give a story battle mode, which, being honest, is essentially the same. However, it gave narrated text images along with specific fights to go along with your character's story that you chose. Remember just how memorable this song was the first time you heard it.
2 years ago, Heihachi failed to capture Ogre, but his researchers succeeded in collecting samples of its blood and tissue. These in turn were used in an attempt to create a new life form by combining Heihachi's and Ogre's genetic material. The experiment failed, however, and Heihachi learned that he lacked the devil gene necessary to integrate Ogre's genome with his own.
Now, being honest, I'm not going to go too far into the gameplay of the game because that's actually one of the biggest negatives of it, and the main reason why the game was so poorly perceived, being honest. People didn't like the wall mechanic. But over time, the game has actually become more memorable despite this. The fact that every level of Tekken 4 is an actual location either related directly to the story or is flat out a location of the tournament is amazing in and of itself. Each stage having a song designed specifically for it in look and feel, which normally was just designed to a particular character that you chose. Law had a stage and song, Paul had a stage and song, Nina had a stage and song. Now, the stage had its own feel and it lent itself to the overall feel of the game, which was never done before. Tekken didn't really have an overall feel prior to this. Nothing was more satisfying than uppercutting the life out of someone on the street and hearing this at the end of the round. Also, the game's updated Tekken Force mode, where, as the name suggests, you beat up members of the Tekken Force until you've completed all the levels. This mode allowed better movement compared to Tekken 3's, which is hilarious considering that movement is one of the biggest weaknesses of Tekken 4 from a gameplay standpoint. Like I said before, the game is bashed specifically for its wall mechanics, but it fits so well in Tekken Force mode, at least for this game. Also, you're fighting Kazuya at a pseudo-replica version of Devil Kazuya's Tekken 2 stage, with the song playing in the background. It's absolutely incredible. Then the character designs itself. As an artist, I have an immense appreciation for the updated looks of the Tekken characters in 4. Outside of Yoshimitsu's design that I personally feel like was a downgrade, that and Hahashi in a diaper. Yes, I know it's not a diaper. Every Tekken 4 design looked absolutely amazing. Hwoarang looked more mature in a way that we wouldn't see again until Tekken 8. This was before they started giving him the belly vest. Paul with his hair down made him look more rugged. Law was evil looking Bruce Lee now. Kazuya returned back from the dead, essentially with the glowing devil eye making him look more evil than ever before. And Jin, the main character of Tekken 4, began his emo descent with the full hooded jumpsuit design, which might be one of my favorite of all time. I actually own this hoodie, by the way. I also, since I'm on the subject of Jin, don't think that Tekken 4 gets enough credit for doing something that I don't think is really common in fighting games. Jin is the main character of Tekken's story. I mean, his entire story in Tekken 4 is canon, but he was an unlockable character. That's right, if you picked up the disc for Tekken 4, which has Jin as the main character on the cover, and you put the game in and started to play, you could not play as Jin Kazama. He had to be unlocked first. The main character had to be unlocked in the game. That is wild. Imagine playing Mortal Kombat with Liu Kang on the cover of MK1 and you have to unlock him somehow to play with him. Or playing Street Fighter and having to unlock Luke. Oh my god, the thought. But even characters like Chaoyu's design was an improvement over the previous games, or how all the newbies in Tekken 4, granted it was only 3 of them, just fit like a glove. Tekken 4's design team put incredible amounts of thought into the look and feel of the game, and it showed completely. And then there's the story. Harada, the lead of the Tekken series, has often cited Tekken 4 as one of the darkest of the franchise, and he couldn't be more correct. We get the first confrontation of 3 of Tekken's main characters in a violent family reunion. That Hamaru battle is amazing to me, but even the nature and the weight of Tekken 4's tone differs so much from the past, and the music adds to that. I personally think the Inner Shrine theme for Hamaru's stage captures Tekken 4's feel in a nutshell, and it might be one of the most underrated songs in the franchise's history.
Final round. Fight.
And being honest, the same could also be said for the game's intros. The horns and the energetic nature of the song that's playing as Kazuya narrates his rise to power once again is just beautiful. There's so much to Tekken 4, and I'm sure I've missed out on some things too because a lot was put into this game. It's a shame that the gameplay felt so limiting in comparison to where Tekken 3 and more importantly Tekken Tag Tournament grew to, and the smaller environments and walls hindered it so much because the game would actually be an absolute masterpiece. A regret that I had from my childhood for a while was passing up on this game for Soul Calibur 2 at the time, because this game was such a moment in time and I don't think there'll ever be another entry in the series, at least in the foreseeable future, that stands apart so much from every single game that came before it and after it. Even Tekken 5 doesn't feel as unique as 4 did when it was released. But those are my thoughts. Let me know whether you think Tekken 4 is such a unique entry into the franchise, or just let me know if you think Tekken 4 was trash, to be quite honest. Either way, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and you all have a good one, and I'm out. Okay, so we've been going down a rabbit hole of PS2 Era Tekken for a while now, and for good reason. In my opinion, those games are prime Tekken, but the absolute peak of the series to me in this time period without a doubt had to be Tekken 5. If Tekken 4 is the most unique feeling Tekken in history, Tekken 5 just is downright the funnest. Alright, so as I've touched on previously, Tekken 4 was released in 2002 to mixed reviews. I personally love the game a lot, and I've said numerous times it's one of the most unique and darkest feeling games in the series, but not everyone was on board with it. Some people were less than impressed with Tekken 4. To remedy this, Namco released Tekken 5 in 2004. It didn't really follow up much on the dark tone and nature and feel of Tekken 4, much to my disappointment, nor did it really stick to the amount of realism that Tekken 4 was going for, but it more than made up for that in the most important way that I think is lost on a lot of modern fighting games, even video games period nowadays. It was simply made to be fun as hell. Tekken 5 always felt like some type of weird-ass apology to the fans of the series after Tekken 4 was released. It was almost like throwing this big old party after attending a funeral. Like, they just added so much to this game. I touched on in my Tekken 4 video how much they changed a lot of little things in the series to make it look completely different from how you remembered most Tekken games. And most of those changes are still reflected here in Tekken 5. A lot of the ideas from Tekken 4 are pretty much retained in this one, only as I've said before, they made it more fun. Everything just feels upbeat and alive. The main menu actually has music present, which wasn't really a thing in the other Tekken games. I think every Tekken has complete silence in the main menus. The look and colors of the menu were also way more vibrant. Hell, compare the character select theme songs of Tekken 4 to Tekken 5.
Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4.
The King of Iron Fist Tournament 5.
They also added a more diverse cast of characters for Tekken 5. The additions are well welcome, not to mention the fact that they brought back a lot of classic characters from Tekken's past, which makes a much larger roster than was present in Tekken 4. Another criticism of Tekken 4, by the way. They even replaced the fact that Jun Kazama was missing since Tekken Tag and story-wise Tekken 2, and instead inserted her niece Asuka Kazama, also the cousin of the series' main character Jin Kazama. Don't worry, we'll come back to him later. The gameplay from Tekken 4 is pretty much the main reason why it was such a mixed bag, to be quite honest. The more grounded, less juggly gameplay, along with the more tight fighting spaces, and some outrageously broken characters, by the way, and mechanics, wasn't really loved by everybody. I personally love how gritty Tekken 4 felt, but honestly the return to form in Tekken 5 was kind of refreshing. As a Warang player, I definitely felt the difference in Tekken 5's gameplay. Tekken 5 feels a lot more free, and it's a lot of fun to just dive into and start playing again. Even though Tekken 5 might have an absolutely frustrating boss character, though I should have counted my blessings. But honestly, never mind the gameplay. I'm not a competitive fighting game player, so I don't really care about the gameplay as much as like a tournament person would. It's Tekken. For the most part, most of the games are gonna play pretty solid to begin with. Let's look at some of the other things that Tekken 5 had to offer. Remember when I said Tekken 4 felt like a departure from the Tekken games previously like 2 minutes ago? Well, Tekken 5 said, okay, well, I guess you guys miss all the classic games. Well, we'll make Tekken 5 play more like those. Then it said, as a matter of fact, screw that. We'll just add the arcade versions of Tekken 1, 2, and 3 in the damn game. I don't think people today realize how absolutely insane it was that you had every single Tekken game minus 4 and Tag in one spot. And note, it wasn't like Tekken 5 was some high-priced game or they added an extra cost to it. No, it cost like 40, 50 bucks just like most of the fighting games at the time. Like, this is crazy. Now, again, these are the arcade versions of 1, 2, and 3, and the difficulty is ridiculous, being quite honest with you. I almost spent 30 minutes fighting Tekken 2 Kazuya as a kid, but I'm not gonna lie, I'll still take it. The soundtrack for Tekken 5 is a return to form as well. Tekken 4 for the most part had darker, more moody songs that fit the environments. The stages also fit the story of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. Most of the locations where the people are fighting in the tournament is pretty much where you'll be fighting at in the game. But Tekken 5 has some pretty wild locations to be fighting in. Some that tie to the story and others that kinda don't. But looking at Tekken 5 and its update on the PSP Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, some of the songs in these games may be my all-time favorites. The Cathedral, the Snow Castle, and the Hall of Fate might be some of my favorite songs in Tekken history, but I'm also well aware that I'll probably get destroyed in this video if I don't acknowledge one of the most revered and iconic Tekken stages and songs in history that this game gave us.
Round 1. Fight!
Okay, and yeah, I get why. That song is still amazing. Tekken 5 had the normal modes that you would expect, like the arcade mode, the normal time attack, survival modes, all that type of stuff that you've expected in the entire series. But Tekken Force mode from Tekken 3 and Tekken 4 has officially been replaced in this game, and they replaced it with a mode called the Devil Within. Honestly, when I first heard this, I didn't necessarily like it. I like the idea of like picking my own character and just beating up the Tekken Force for I don't know how many levels at a time. The idea of just playing through a beat 'em up mode in Tekken with Jin, and it is its own mode. It's not like you're playing with the regular Tekken controls. It has its own control scheme and a bit of free roaming areas. It's kind of its own thing that's a little separate from Tekken Force mode when you deep dive into it. And me saying that I didn't like this mode went right out the window when I first opened the mode up and started playing, and I heard this. Yeah, I'm all for bringing back Jin's Tekken 3 theme song. Playing through a mini adventure quest with Jin is actually a lot of fun in this game. And if you win and beat the game, oh my god, I almost forgot to touch on that. Complete sidebar for a second. Another Tekken 4 criticism was that Jin played nothing like the old Jin. Now, original Tekken Tag Tournament and Tekken 3 Jin was extremely overpowered. But in Tekken 4, he was a broken cheat code. However, people like myself still wanted that old Jun-Kazuya hybrid. Well, when you beat the Devil Within, guess what you unlock? Devil Jin. A character that was actually rumored to be in the game going all the way back to the days of Tekken Tag. I still remember wasting countless hours reading a stupid game facts code back in the day that said you could play as Devil Jin in Tekken Tag, and it was a lie. God, I wasted so much time. But I mean, I was a kid, I didn't know any better. But Devil Jin plays exactly like old school Jin from the classic games. He's back. Or if you didn't really want to go through the Devil Within to unlock Devil Jin, you could just keep beating the game over and over until he just shows up in the character select menu. They say beat Tekken in about 200 rounds, but I don't know if that's a real number or not. I don't think I've ever beat that many rounds in the game or played the game that many times before he ended up actually showing up. I know the best bet most people take is to try to beat story battle with every character in the game to unlock Devil Jin, but if I'm not mistaken, before you even finish beating it with every character, I think he pops up at some point. So who knows? Speaking of the story battle returns just like it did in Tekken 4. That iconic music that I talked about from Tekken 4 makes its return in Tekken 5. Only again, it's more upbeat and more lively than it was in Tekken 4.
Law
now penniless, stayed in Japan to work as a dishwasher. A month later, his wife called him. Their runaway son was in an accident, riding around on Paul Phoenix's bike.
Also, the story of Tekken 5 is still a lot of fun doing story battle, but the one knock that I have about this game as a casual player was that the story felt nothing like the previous game. Tekken 4 felt dark and you almost felt the weight of the Mishima conflict going throughout the game. And there was a bit of cheese in Tekken 4's character endings for a few people, but it was nothing extremely over the top outside of like combat. But Tekken 5 has a lot of cheese to it.
Knew what he had to do. I'll save the Zaibatsu.
Instead of getting a cool family reunion between Jin and Asuka, we get this weird-ass incestuous ending instead. Also, the endings for Paul and Law are absolutely ridiculous. This was the beginning of Paul and Law becoming absolute jokes in Tekken. Well, I think Law had started this trend long before now.
Round 1, fight.
But while the overall story endings for a lot of Tekken characters were lacking in 5, the actual story itself and its consequences were extremely significant. Hashtag Warong really won Tekken 5. Again, I can't state enough just how much fun Tekken 5 is, and as far as the story is concerned, there is nothing more fun than watching the temporary team up of father and son. I honestly think I might have to let it run a bit right here.
Is dead.
You know, one day he's gonna be right about that. But there is so much more to this game that I could cover, but honestly I'd be here forever. Even little features being added like the character customization, which would become a game changer for Tekken in the future, or even Ghost Battle, which was awesome at the time when Tekken servers were far worse than they are today and not everybody was playing online. In the end, Tekken 5 lacked the overall aura of Tekken 4, but it more than made up for that in giving you a fun, heart-thumping experience. For my money, Tekken 5 may be one of the greatest Tekken games of all time. But that's my personal opinion. How do you guys feel about Tekken 5 and where it ranks in the series history? In any event, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and you all have a good one, and I'm out.